Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have returning guests, the Collins brothers. If you listen to my show, you'll know their work. We've done about 6 or 7 shows in the past. We've covered a lot of stuff that they've published from the Canadian Patriot. You'll see that here. They're on a part 4, Deception Through Disclosure. The one that I'm looking at right now is the Coming Cosmic Operation Northwoods. So go check out Paul and Philip Collins over there on the Canadian Patriot. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But we've also covered some of the articles that they've written for the Decoding Culture Foundation. One is Anglotopian Dream, Science Fiction and the Anglophile Milieu, 1871 to 1904. And then the other one was Automated Autotheism, Transhumanism and the Technological Transposition of Divinity. So you can check those out. We've also covered some of their books, Invoking the Beyond, Kantian Rift. I think we did a part 1 and 2. And one of the other ones, we kind of decoded the Grush Enigma, which was really strange. Ties to Esalen and all kinds of stuff. But again, we're going to talk about this one today, the Coming Cosmic Operation Northwoods. So Paul and Philip, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having us on, William.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Bill.
Awesome. So for people who haven't heard our last shows or anything like that, can you just do a brief background, kind of talk about your writing careers, and then what that led up to this 4-part series, Deception Through Disclosure?
Sure. Well, this is Philip Collins, and I have a bachelor's degree in communication studies with emphasis on print media, and also a bachelor's degree in liberal studies with an emphasis on literature and a philosophy minor. And it was through my philosophical studies that I eventually became familiar with the topic of scientism, which is essentially epistemological imperialism, the imposition of science upon all fields of inquiry, which is not only pure folly, but extremely dangerous, because science, given the fact that it's predisposed to the quantitative and empirical methods of investigation, it tends to jettison recalcitrant data and reduce man to nothing more than the level of unsophisticated base animality. And this allows for the ascendance of a scientific technical elite, as Eisenhower put it. And that was the topic of our first book, The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, which charts the course and development of technocracy, which is a rule by a technical scientific elite. And then shortly after that, we also wrote Invoking the Beyond, which deals with the invocation of a deific force that acts as a surrogate for the divine, a surrogate for God. We live in an era of modern myth makers. They fashioned several myths for us, like the myth of the wrathful earth goddess, the myth of AI and technological singularity, and the myth, most significantly and most fantastically, the myth of extraterrestrial gods. And that's pretty much represents the crescendo of the invocation of the beyond, which is really just a narrative construct that is used to ontologically and epistemologically overwhelm all representative forms of government and allow for the introduction of a deus ex machina in the form of a technocratic elite. So yeah, that's how we basically came into these topics. At least myself, I came into it through my philosophical studies. Paul, of course, comes at it from more of the vantage point of poli-sci, of political science, which is what he has his minor in.
Yeah. And I didn't, like a lot of journalism, I worked for Times Community News out in Ohio, and I still do some stringer work in Ear and Lusk for the Lusk Herald. And on the alternative side, I've done articles that appeared in Paranoia and Nexus. When Keith Hansen was still alive under the moniker of Visigoth, he did for a brief period of time a journal of some sort that we wrote for, and we also wrote for Michael Corbin, who was a syndicated talk show host out of Colorado, down south of here, and we did a lot of work with him. And for his show, A Closer Look, he had like a magazine that accompanied the show called the ACL Report, which just stood for A Closer Look. And Mike was really the one that put us on the trail of that particular invocation of the beyond, the UFOs, because Mike had been steeped in ufology. I mean, before he had A Closer Look, he had the
Paranet Continuum.
Yeah, the Paranet Continuum. And, he had been in contact with all those people, Linda Moulton Howe, Jacques Vallée, and, had a lot of the people that, the celebrities of ufology on his show. And, but Mike started to get creeped out by a lot of it. He noticed two things. One thing he noticed was, he's like, for objective people that are supposedly taking an objective or scientific approach to this phenomenon, these people sure use a lot of occult methodology.
They sure do.
Yeah, and that freaked him out. And the second thing is that there was this recurring thing where people in the military or in the intelligence community, individuals that would be recognized as recurring characters in what's known as deep politics, and the study of deep politics or parapolitics or whatever you want to call it. And all, they kept on coming up, they kept on emerging, and case after case.
Yeah, they would become involved invariably. Would become involved in these ufological cases, and their involvement would be rather dubious, it was very suspicious, the extent to which they were involved.
So that's what put us on the trail with UFOs, and recently what we noticed is that a new phase in the deception has taken place. See, what was going on prior to this period in the 21st century was best described by Charles Upton as the government cover-up ploy. That's the way that he referred to it, where they were basically creating the illusion that the government is trying to cover up an alien presence here on Earth, doing all that they can to suppress the evidence thereof, and through this ploy, they kind of play into they intentionally play into the confirmation bias of people within the ufological circles and people within the UFO community who say, who look at all this, and say, well, they're obviously suppressing this. They're obviously covering this up. They're leveling threats at witnesses and all. It must be true. There must be aliens here. And, and that's how they kept the deception going. That was the manipulation for a very, very long time, for almost 50 or 60 years. Things have shifted gears now. Now they're trying to, the deception is one of disclosure, of fake disclosure. Just like there was a fake cover-up, now there's a fake disclosure where the government, feigns this kind of capitulation. Okay, you found us out. We give up. And we're just going to start, giving you the information, and the information is an indication that the white flag is being run up the flagpole, and they're getting ready to let us all know what we already believe to be true, that there's that there's an alien presence here on Earth. And so that's what the series is about. And hopefully when it, when it's all said and done, we're going to synthesize this one into a book form.
Yeah. Now, the purpose for the revelation of this alleged alien presence, it serves multiple functions, depending on whatever narrative paradigm you're operating under. You can operate under the narrative paradigm of alien visitation precipitating a crisis of diplomacy. How does a multipolar world conduct itself diplomatically with the visitation by extraterrestrial beings, thereby necessitating the formation of a technocratic world state, the amalgamation of all sovereign nation states into a single supranational entity.
So that you can have one entity that speaks for the entire planet so as to avoid a breakdown in diplomacy or misunderstandings.
Which by its very nature has to be totalitarian. You will have the complete and total obliteration of representative bodies such as parliaments, congresses, what have you. Then the other narrative paradigm is the militaristic threat paradigm, the paradigm of the invading alien force, which invariably precipitates, again, the formation of a technocratic world state, this time under the auspices of meeting the militaristic threat from beyond with our own military, and a unified world army. But in either case, you have identical outcomes. You have a technocratic world state. You have the complete and total abolition of representative bodies and the enshrinement of technocracy. Then the second function that's served by the invocation of an alien presence, of an alien visitation, is the introduction of a new neo-Gnostic spirituality, because basically according to this new myth, for whatever reasons inexplicable to us, now space has become this numinous realm, this the new supernatural reality, the new heaven and earth. We see the complete and total transposition of the eschaton into the vacuum separating celestial bodies, and space becomes the place where all the eschatological yearnings of religion are fulfilled.
Think of the search for Spock, where resurrection is actually a reality on another planet.
On another planet, also 2001: Space Odyssey. A great many of the great deal of science fiction has intimated this spirituality, but on a spiritual level, the level of belief, the level of religious belief, this is advantageous also to a ruling elite, because the soteriology, while knowledge, and this is a neo-Gnostic faith, while soteriology was ostensibly individualistic and it ignored all the communal aspects of Orthodox Christianity, the end point, the final destination on Gnosticism was reabsorption into the pleroma, which was this singular deific power. So individual identity is submerged in this, broader sea of consciousness and is obliterated. The individual is obliterated. Well, what happens when you ideologize a soteriology like that? Well, you have, on a political level, collectivism, the subordination of the individual to the collective, the subordination of personal identity to the apotheosized state. And that's the purpose served by this invocation of an alien presence.
Gotcha. Right. So it's like this serves a purpose, right? It's a service for, it's like a new heaven. It's it's a new earth in a lot of ways, this whole view of less. And you have to see it with the technocrats too. You have to see it with people like Elon Musk, this drive towards Mars is almost like a heavenly saga or a heavenly realm. Like instead of going to heaven and fulfilling your work on earth, as Christ said. It's something else. Like, we got to get to Mars. We can do it. Come on. So it's
Yeah.
almost like these are being transposed. Yeah.
Yeah, all these theological concepts, the idea of a fall, the idea of redemption, the idea of an eschaton, if you will, an end of days, of of time when death is abolished, the abolition of death, eternal life, all of that. They believe in it probably as much as any of Christian of any stripe does. It's just that they've planted it firmly within this this ontological plane of reality.
Right. And you see that the eschatological hopes being of this new, neo-Gnostic, latter-day neo-Gnostic, or interplanetary neo-Gnosticism, which is derivative of the neo-Gnostic scheme of an 18th century Enlightenment pamphleteer named Jacob Levy. You see it being affirmed by the works of in the works of science fiction, like H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells was actually inspired to write War of the Worlds, and present the audiences with this invasion from Mars. He was inspired to write it by the supposed findings of a gentleman by the name of Percival Lowell, who had allegedly from his revolving dome observatory, he had allegedly basically seen what he thought were canali, or canals, ancient waterways on Mars. And so Mars became kind of a shining beacon of hope for this this new space religion. But
and Percival Lowell actually is significant in part 4 of this article, which includes a very, very extensive review, almost like a book report, if you will, of the 1950 book The Flying Saucer, that was written by Bernard Newman, who wasn't just another run-of-the-mill science fiction author. He had worked with the Ministry of Information, I believe, during World War II and sometime after, so he was very much aware of very, very familiar with psychological operations, very appreciative of the whole notion of discrete power. And he one of his characters in the book is himself. He actually appears in his own book. He's one of the conspirators that is trying to fake this alien invasion and trying to convince the people of the world that the Martians are attacking. And one of the things that he's the propagandist in the cabal in the book, just as he's a propagandist, and he was a propagandist in real life. And one of the things that he does is to prepare the world for this fake invasion, that the narrative that they're going to hatch, is he begins to seed the culture with the reintroduction of Percival Lowell's work over supposed Martian canals, so that people would be ready to accept this what is really kind of an almost exaggerated, unrealistic notion that the planet is being assailed by the Martian military. And so, he's Percival Lowell actually makes an appearance in that book, and we point that out in the article. But the article really takes up where everything segues with this series. And the 4th installment takes up where the 3rd installment left off. And in the 3rd installment, we brought up an individual by the central character in that 3rd installment was a man named Paul Nitze. He was an American businessman and he was a government official, and he had come up with a defining document for the Cold War called the National Security Council Policy Paper 68, NSC 68. And, people are like, why in the hell would you bring that up? That's about as far removed from ufology as East is from the West, but actually it's not. Now, what Nitze's paper did is suggest that the whole Cold War be militarized, and that the only way to really have an effective deterrent to the communist world was to just amp up the defense expenditures and to really get the military industrial complex rolling. And, that was the only way to meet the communist threat. So he departed from his mentor, who was George Kennan, a bit. George Kennan was a historian and kind of a counselor to the State Department. And he, all that Kennan wanted to do was like, well, let's put the communist world in quarantine. And so, we kind of partitioned them off from the rest of the world. But Paul Nitze said, yes, partition them off, and then let's build up a tremendous military force. And this will, help counter the communist menace and eventually bring it falling down. And, like I said, many people would consider this tangential to the whole subject of UFOs, but this is where the UFOs come into the story of Paul Nitze. There were several different thinkers and different, whether it be scientists, military men, all who basically supported and subscribed to Paul Nitze's Cold War philosophy. And they were afraid that at some point, eventually that Cold War philosophy of militarism and statism would start to wane and start to weaken. So in order to keep that going, you need new threat narratives, especially as the communist Chinese start to fade, as the Soviet Union starts to fade. We need another narrative to keep that rolling. And so a lot of those individuals, found the new threat narrative to be the UFOs. They found that would be a viable threat narrative. Among them was Edward Teller, for instance, the Hungarian father of the H-bomb. He was part of what was called the Committee on the Present Danger, which was this organization that was totally committed to the precepts of NSC 68. And what he did was he put out a lot of UFO stories of hostile aliens, put them out there into the ether. Even used some of his work on Star Wars to perpetrate the UFO myth of hostile aliens. And
Star Wars, as in the Reagan,
the space program, right? Reagan space program.
Exactly. And his stories, a lot of what he pushed, back in the late 80s and early 90s, ended up, becoming the core stories of the UFO lore of the that we're all familiar with, underground bases with aliens, alien underground bases, aliens sparring off against special forces, in these underground bases and the like. And
they're
unfortunately,
alive. People have seen them. There's
Yeah,
bodies somewhere. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, in addition to being the committee on the present danger, Edward Tiller was in all likelihood also part of what was called the Aviary, which was a group of a group um, uh, of different government officials, former government officials, intelligence people that claimed, that they wanted to get the truth out about UFOs. And this group was able to spread disinformation through Bill Moore, who was a co-author on the book about Roswell. I think one of the very first real books about Roswell. They got it out through him. They also got it out through an individual named Paul Benowitz, who unfortunately was an unwitting, an unwitting player in all this, and it drove him mad. He ended
Like
up
literally insane. Like not just like, oh, he's wacky. No, he went into a mental institution.
no, yeah, you're right. He went into a psychiatric institution because
Yeah.
In no small measure because of the efforts of Richard Doty.
yeah.
Right. That's another story. There's a really good book on that. It's Saucer, Spooks, and Kooks.
Yeah,
by Adam Go Rightly. Yeah.
Adam Go Rightly. I've also read Project Beta, and I think that gave a good in depth of what happened. It really chronicled that descent into madness, and also Mirageman did a good job too.
Mirageman, yeah, that's a documentary. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a book version of it that by Mark Pilkington too, and everything. So I mean, Edward Teller, one of the reasons that he was disseminating this with the aviary was to just basically prop up the militaristic and statist trends that we saw with NSC 68. And so, Nitze still, plays a role in the fourth installment. He's still significant, to study because of his role that he played in a 1963 proposal that many people know about, and all known as Project Northwoods. And Project Northwoods was basically this series of suggested false flags that would, lead the United States into war with Castro's Cuba. They included plans to like shoot down commercial jetliners, or the fake shooting them down. Releasing havoc on the streets of Florida, I believe, in one case. The sabotaging Glenn's trip into space, and all. And Nitze was one of the individuals who contributed to this series of false flag propositions. And he
presented all the way to JFK, guys, all the way to the top.
Yep.
Lemnitzer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kennedy surrounded by crazies, like literal Doctor Strangelove characters.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But like Nitze was saying, hey, take the U-2 and fly the U-2 on these low-level reconnaissance missions into over Cuban airspace, and keep on doing it until we finally get the desired effect, which is the plane being shot down. And so then we have the pretext to invade. And so here's the man that basically set off UFO disinformation in the name of UFO. He did his part to set off this UFO disinformation campaign to keep the statist and militaristic trend alive in America, and he's part of this false flag, this false flag proposal. And so we in the article basically proposed that there is a UFO equivalent to Northwoods, that there might be actually a cosmic Northwoods, that's being planned, that's in the preparation stages. And if you look back all the way to 1951 with Bernard Newman's book, The Flying Saucer, you probably seen the blueprint right there in a fictional form. Because again, this man was not just a regular science fiction writer. He wasn't just writing to entertain an audience. He was a member of the Ministry of Information, like I said. And the Ministry of Information, by the way, actually was the source of inspiration for George Orwell in his book 1984. The propaganda fount of Big Brother in 1984 is based off the Ministry of Information, because George Orwell had learned about all the Machiavellian machinations of the MOI, the Ministry of Information, because his own wife had worked for the MOI, and so if you read this book, which is what we did, we sat with the Flying Saucer, and you read it very carefully. You can see two things. What we propose, two things. Do you see first that he's forecasting this? He obviously knows that a sentiment in elitist circles, in covert political circles, is to one day fake an alien invasion, for the purpose of manipulation. But
they've already done it, right? Didn't Orson Welles do that? Then didn't that like scare people to death? Like they've run kind of tests in the past, right?
Absolutely.
What was the whole? Yeah. So
yes, Orson Welles' War of the
Worlds. Yeah.
That was studied. The response to it, the public response to it, the minor panic that was induced by it, was studied by the Princeton Radio Research Project. And this project was a Rockefeller-funded enterprise. It was financed by the Rockefeller dynasty, which is historically an oligarchical dynasty. It was one of several dynasties whose scions have populated what you could call the global oligarchical establishment. And what was found in that study, the Princeton Radio Research Project, was that with the inducement of panic, it came appeals to powers beyond the average, everyday, ordinary citizen. There was a willingness to acquiesce to an authority that basically surpassed the abilities and the knowledge of your average, everyday human being, and that made the subject, the audience, more pliable and more ready to accept otherwise untenable propositions that you and I or most other people would identify as totalitarian.
Very, very similar conclusions. Right. Very, very similar conclusions to those found in several different documents of John Rawlins Rees's Tavistock Institute. Very Tavistockian kind of conclusion there.
It's a very important event. The War of the Worlds and Orson Welles is very important.
Absolutely.
They look back at that like they're like, oh yeah, this is great. Look, we scared the living daylights out of everybody.
Yeah.
It's like a 9/11 or something, like these events, or COVID or whatever. Just trying to create mass formation of fear.
Yeah,
and profit off it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because if you listen to that program, and everybody goes back once in a while and listens to it because it's great fun. But if you go back and you listen to it, there's nothing to remind you that any of this is just a drama being played out at our RKO or at the radio station.
Right. It's like they made it real, right? They made it
it's all done their documentary style, which they continue to do that with UFOs later on. Like for instance, and we bring this up in the article.
Right, good point. Like, how different is that from some of these UFO stories, right?
Yeah. Well, with the day and we bring this up in the article too, as we bring up the day the Earth stood still, and all, which was a major influence on Ronald Reagan and all those guys that were there, Robert Zanuck, Edmund North, and all the top guys on that show, the producer, the screenwriter, they were all former Army Signals Corps. They were all former Army Signals Corps, and if you look at the way that they did it, there was nothing in the way that movie was done, especially with the landing on the lawn, the introduction of the aliens, the landing on the White House lawn. There was nothing that would allow you to pull back and say, "Hey, calm down, take it easy. This is just a movie." It's done very documentary style, no music. The media reports coming in like they would in reality, all to get that desired psychological effect. And it did profoundly affect a generation, including Ronald Reagan. And it's probably the reason that Colin Powell, who was had to constantly be editing out references to UFOs out of Reagan's speech, because he was just enamored with it. I mean, he was obsessed with this stuff.
Also, there was
and that's his view. This is a real political figure saying it'd be good if somebody came from outer space, because then we could all work together. We could see a foreign enemy.
And interestingly enough, who is a visits the Earth and the day the Earth stood still is an alien being, a humanoid by the name of Carpenter, which is a less than subtle reference to a Jewish carpenter in the Bible. That Carpenter is basically a Christ archetype. He's basically a astrotheological, if you will, astrotheologized version of Christ, but a Christ archetype nonetheless.
I forget who said it, but somebody once said that Satan is the ape of God. To paraphrase that individual, the aliens are now the ape of God in the way that they've been presented, the way they've been presented to us by the hidden social engineers and stuff. But Reagan was enamored with the whole idea because of the day the Earth stood still, and Reagan, it mirrors a character in the book The Flying Saucer, the 1950 book, Newman's The Flying Saucer, Anthony Eden, and the conspiracy begins off with the cabal just sitting there and just casually reading the newspaper, and Anthony Eden is there and suggests, well, maybe, to paraphrase the man, maybe, tensions and diplomacy would be better if there was some kind of hostilities from beyond, some kind of hostilities from space. That would be easier to bring the world together, and that's what sets them off in the book. With this conspiracy, and gets the ball rolling with the conspiracy. And again, this book was, basically him forecasting that one day, sometime in the future, elitist circles, covert powers, the covert power structures that he was familiar with from his time in the MOI would try to do something like this. But it was also in our opinion, his chance to be prescriptive and to provide proposals to that coming conspiracy whenever it took place, which ended up, I guess, starting in a embryonic stage when he was still alive, and reaching all the way up to now, where it's reaching a maturation point with this whole disclosure crap. But the book includes some false flags. There's a series of rockets that crash all over the world, and the rockets are all part of of a message to the human race. One builds upon the other, until you find out what these Martians want. The Martians are experiencing I believe it was called the wasting disease, and they need all of the world's gold to deal with this disease. And so they're demanding that the world give up all of its gold so that they can cure this awful disease that they're facing, or else. And so, the world refuses, and so the the cabal then unleashes a weapon on the world, and the weapon is demonstrated in a mostly abandoned forest area, save for some unfortunate souls, some prisoners that were left there over in I believe it's in Eastern Europe or Russia. It's Bielorussia. It's a very real place, and one of the head conspirator, a scientist by the name of Drummond, who the novel says is several years ahead of the rest of the great minds. For some reason, he's several years ahead in his intellect, and so he's able to, and that intellect that's that advanced is able to, as a result, invent things that appear to be otherworldly and extraterrestrial, but he invents what's called a protonic bomb that is much more devastation, in several orders of magnitude, much more devastating than any nuclear bomb would ever be. Drops it on Bielorussia and scares the hell out of the people, and thus starts to convince the people gradually that is a unified response is needed to take care of this Martian menace. And then they even unleash a Martian corpse on the people of Earth. They actually stage a crash and have a corpse that conveniently enough goes through decomposition before anybody can figure out what the hell this thing really is. And but it's a very real body, this kind of homunculus that's made up of monkey parts, of a Chinese man's body parts, of other animal parts, and convinces the world that this is real, that this is not some kind of large scale hoax. And by the end of the book, the world is very much on its way to world government. And he says that forthrightly. The world government is emergent at the end, and so again, this is one of those questions again. We come across these kind of pieces of fiction periodically. Does life imitate art?
Right.
Or does art imitate life?
Yeah.
It's good. Fact to fiction. Why are these narratives being put out? And how many of the movies and books always involve the backdrop of like a government or world government? Like even The Day Stood Still or Contact or all these other ones. They're always some kind of like civic meeting in DC or somewhere. Like they're always contextualizing these UFO events in a government. So like you see that it's a political impetus. There's some kind of drive to make political change based on these UFOs. My point
Right,
is like,
right.
so that's
Right.
like the Operation Northwoods, and you see it with Grush and all these. These are very formal, meetings where people are serious with people with, seemingly valid credentials, talking about this stuff. So it's ongoing. And one
Right.
of the guests like made a really good comment, like XM says, we have decades and decades of cultural programming with sci-fi that is pushed into every American mind since they're children. Movies, toys, and video games, all about aliens. Yeah, it's really incredible.
You're spot on. Yeah, I mean, it's if when I survey my childhood, I can't count. It was innumerable how many things back then had alien races in it. All the different entertainment from He-Man to
Star Trek.
yeah,
I
Star
love
Trek,
Star Trek.
Transformers, Star Wars, you name it. They all did, But what we're working towards in the next installment, which we're already writing on, is we take up the question of hey, who is the modern day who or what are the candidates for the modern day real life equivalent of Bernard Newman's conspiracy from the flying saucer. And one of the things that we look at in the new one that we're still putting together is a report, a February 2024 report that was released by the Department of Defense's All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARROW. And in that report, um, there's a small paragraph in that report where we think that they actually identify that real life equivalent to the conspiracy in Newman's book, and I can't find, it's not in front of me, but basically it says that all of these stories, if first of all the report finds that there is no evidence for any alien reverse engineering, or in all of the UAP sightings that it looked at, that it reviewed, none of them were extraterrestrial in nature. And then it says that all these stories, the report goes on to say that all these stories of extraterrestrial reverse engineering, of extraterrestrial origin behind the different UAP stories, all go back to the same group, to OSAP/ATIP, to the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, and its later incarnation, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And so there is the real life conspiracy that mirrors what's in Bernard Newman's book. It's this fraternity of people that worked in OSAP and ATIP, or worked with OSAP and ATIP, and are somehow associated with them. And that brings us almost full circle back to David Grush, back to Lou Elizondo, back to Bigelow, Robert Bigelow, and all of those guys. And it's a
lot of them.
Yeah, it's a lot of them. It's a whole hell of a lot of them.
And that's how kind of PR works. Is this, they make this almost like a lineman formation of everybody kind of saying the same thing or something similar, and
Right.
it creates that Ash experiment, right? Where
Right.
everybody says the line is this far, and when you walk in, you go, "Well, if you all say the line's that far, the line's that far, right? I'm not
Right.
going to say something else." Right?
Right.
So like you're seeing it play out, these kind of like behavioral psychology stuff.
Oh yeah.
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 Really amazing.
Oh,
Do you guys have time to take a few of the comments?
yeah, absolutely.
We're at the
Sure.
48-minute mark. Somebody, Oswald Spengler asks, could you ask the Collins Bros about rhesus negative blood types in regards to disclosure? I have no idea what that means. Do you guys know what that means?
I'd have to study that to find. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I know anything about that.
XM aliens make you disbelieve your religion and believe their weird Satan religion. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, these people turn to occult methodology all the time. If you look at Bigelow's outfit when they were at Skinwalker Ranch, you hear that they were doing all these scientific experiments, and then the security guards that were part of it come out and tell you, well, actually, they were messing with Ouija boards, So, for why are scientists, where's the scientific method? Why are they turning to? They look more like occultist.
Right.
than they do.
Well, and also
Right.
the dominant hermeneutic, and I've said this repeatedly, the dominant hermeneutic according to which the UFO phenomena or the modern UFO phenomena is understood, the interpretive lens to which it is seen, was established during the 18th century Enlightenment by a neo-Gnostic pamphleteer and theoretician by the name of Jacob E. Levy. In his Latter-day Interplanetary Neo-Gnosticism, he posited that humanity was nothing more than apostate angels who were imprisoned within ontologically suboptimal physical bodies. Our physical bodies were nothing more than a form of incarceration, and we could eventually ascend beyond this world to other worlds where we would achieve deific status. We would be apotheosized, and worldly habitations. Those were initially on a Levy were actually what Jesus was referring to when he said, "In my Father's house are many mansions." Those many mansions to which Christ was alluding on Jacob Levy were actually otherworldly habitations, and all of the modern UFO myths are somehow derivative of Jacob Levy's latter-day interplanetary Gnosticism. This theologized view of space that is designed to be, in our view, the new religion that will be promulgated through the introduction of UFO myths, because again, it calls for the radical homogenization of humanity into a singular planetary organism, which when you ideologize that, when you look at that codified as a political doctrine is collectivism, which is advantageous to the technocrats.
Gotcha. Let's see. More domestic Gladio. It seems like it.
Yeah,
Can't get the funding if there's no boogeyman to find. Alex says, "Where have the brothers been? I'm reading their book, The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship." Amazing book from 2006. Still pertinent. They're here. Done
Yeah,
shows. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like we're working for Dakota Culture Foundation a lot, and I do a lot of work with the Rising Tide Foundation and with Canadian, Matt Ehret's Canadian Patriot, review, basically publishing articles through there. What the hope is that we're gonna synthesize this all into a new book about disclosure. And it will include these installments that we've written, plus hopefully and what we're going to also add some additional chapters onto it. And what we want to do is to basically find a publisher for that, and try to get it as far and wide, a lot farther than the other books have gotten
Gotcha.
a lot more exposure.
Gotcha. X-Flux says, "I kind of believe that secularism is just the worship of aliens. I've never met an atheist who doesn't only A, believe in aliens, B, worship aliens, and C, denigrate humanity." People on a little blue ball. Interesting. Yeah.
That's a very salient observation. We broached that topic in our article, Automated Autotheism. The secularism is actually, in the words of Eric Vogelin, a radical emanatism, as he put it. That's quite a mouthful, but basically what secularism does is it basically renders the whole world nothing more than a closed emanate frame wherein humanity can be apotheosized. And you look at the luminaries of secular thought, like Marx, like Lenin, Feuerbach. What they did was they projected all of the finer features of, they held that religion was the projection of all the finer features of humanity into this hypostatic beyond. And the great turning point of history would come when man would draw that projection back into himself and be transfigured into Superman. It's Superman in a Nietzschean sense, the Ubermensch. So yes, secularism is secularism. Why it ostensibly it represents a diminution in the prominence of religious thinking, of religious thought. It does intimate a theos. It intimates a God, and that God is man himself. So secularism kind of qualifies as an anthropocentric theocracy, a man-centered theocracy, wherein man becomes God himself.
Right, right. There's no God but man. That's what Crowley said.
That's
I
right.
already mentioned this. Decades cultural program. Naked Ape. Don't know what that means. X-Flux asks, what do they think about cattle mutilation phenomena and its relation to blue beam politics?
Well, we basically, okay. So we're going to take up the question of cattle mutilation. I'm glad he brings it up because we're going to take it up a little bit in the fifth installment because, again, we're looking at the OSAP/ATIP fraternity in the next one because we believe that that's the real life equivalent of the fictional conspiracy in Bernard Newman's The Flying Saucer. And one of the individuals that was part of that whole OSAP/ATIP fraternity was a guy, a former CIA scientist by the name of Christopher Kit Green. And Christopher Kit Green said that one of the psychological operations that was taking place. He disclosed this to Mark Pilkington. One of the operations included flying around helicopters that were disguised as UFOs, and so when you look at these different stories of black military grade unmarked helicopters, you also find that they're connected to cattle mutilation and so what's going on here? What's going on here? Helicopters that behave like UFOs, going around mutilating cattle. This is part of propagating the myth. This is part of scaring people and convincing them that aliens are not only here, but that aliens are molesting the wildlife, including and the human race and all. And again, the whole deception is characterized by function stacking, and so you got one part in an operation that's used to achieve multiple ends. So maybe they might be also mutilating these cattle as scientific experiments, but and testing different things on these cattle. But that doesn't mean that they can't also be used for, you find one of your herd just torn up, the psychological effect that's done by that. It's probably also to have a psychological impact on the people, and because people in New Mexico going all the way back to 1975 were they had the hell scared out of them by all the mutilation.
That's Molten Howe. You mentioned her earlier, right?
Who's that?
I think
Yeah,
I think Molten Howe did a big book on the cattle mutilations, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She did a Strange Harvest. I read that one.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you want a better section, a better take on it, read. I would advise people to get a hold of Lawrence Fawcett's book, Barry J. Greenwood's book, Clear Intent. They have a chapter over mysterious black helicopters and the nexus between those mystery copters and UFOs and cattle mutilation. It does a lot better, a lot better job, and it actually poses more possibilities than just extraterrestrials.
Right. It doesn't suffer from the confirmation bias that you find in Linda Moulton Howe's work. Yeah.
One of the things that they suggest, one of the things they suggest, one possibility they suggest concerning the mystery copters that are kind of disguised as UFOs is that they belong to what they describe as quote unquote a paragovernment, a group that's operating as a government within a government. Well, that's the deep state right there. So,
right. Wow. Let's see where I got lost in this. People are talking a lot. Okay. Any question for the guest? Control room. Already asked that. Earth should still. They switched to shrooms and interdimensional nonsense. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
The another insidious part. This is Axelux program is copulation with the aliens, right? No, so that's another kind of weird aspect to this whole myth making.
Celestial bloodlines. Celestial
Yeah.
bloodlines, which kind of affirms the premises of eugenical thinking. Are there actual gods among men? Organisms that are far higher than we, human beings that are far higher than we. We're just destined for extinction while they're meant, to ascend to other worldly habitations as veritable gods.
All right. Crease, the Collins Bros are wizards. They rarely do podcasts. Good on you for having them on. Guys, ask them on. Find their
Yeah.
stuff. Contact, reach out to them. They're on. I talk to them on X all the time. So
Hey,
send a message.
yeah. Thanks, Grease. Johnny Sensei.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They believe in the new God for this aeon. I believe so, Uncle Ted.
Right.
This is Brett. Hey, Brett. How's it going? Cyp Cinema. Yes, the Collins Bros are the state of the art on researching the alien deception. We're proud to feature all their articles on the subject at the Decoding Culture Foundation site.
Yeah,
So
we're
you can
proud
click
to be
on that
featured
site.
there.
Brett.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, Brett. Hope you're
Yeah.
well.
Thank
We had 150 live listeners, so thanks everybody for listening. Is there anything you'd like to add, guys, or anything I missed?
Oh, just really quick. I want to end with this. One of the things at the close of the of part 4 of the 4th installment, one of the things we say is that we believe that the modern day, the real life equivalent of Drummond, who's the brilliant scientist that's part of the conspiracy in the flying saucer, that the real life equivalent is none other than Avi Loeb, the Harvard scientist, who's also a part of this OSAP/ATIP fraternity. And what is Avi Loeb beating the drum for right now? 3i Atlas, 3i Atlas, 3i Atlas. So this might be his attempt to bring about the cosmic Northwoods with this whole 3i Atlas thing. He already tried it once before with the whole the one space bird that was floating around, Umamu, I believe it was called Umamu, something. He's really pushing it with this 3i Atlas thing, and so they might, covert political circles might have something planned surrounding, the appearance of this 3i Atlas. We'll see, because the way he's pushing it, boy, if it turns out being the nothing burger that we believe it to be and all, unless he's saved by a false flag, I could see this ruining his damn career. He's just going to make himself look like an idiot.
Right. So I don't. This is first time it's come to my attention. So something supposedly passing through the Earth or something. Is that it?
Yeah. It's like he's using it to popularize what's called the dark forest theory. And the dark forest theory is that if we were ever visited by another race from space, by an aliens, they would feel obliged. They have to destroy us. They would have to destroy us because they would view us as nothing more than competitors, as a threat.
Gotcha. Where can people reach out and find you? I mentioned that you guys are on Twitter, or I think it's Phil's on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. You can, message me at any time. We also we have an email address, thecollinsbros@yahoo.com. Our books, The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship and Invoking the Beyond, are available through Amazon.com. You can read our articles up at the Decoding Culture Foundation website. You can also read some of our articles up at Matt Ehret's Canadian Patriot website. You feel free to reach out to us, through email or through Twitter, whatever. And just request us for podcasts, because we'd love to do more interviews.
Yeah, guys, come on, reach out to him. You can actually reach out to Brett too at the Decoding Culture Foundation. Go read the articles. Go read their articles there. You can also listen to me talking to them about their articles on William Ramsey Investigates and their books. So you can just find any player. There's so many new podcast distribution apps and websites. You can just type in Collins, go to William Ramsey Investigates, type in Collins. There's 6 or 7 there. I think there's a couple old ones, and Visigoth's old show from the Grassy Knoll. Rest in peace, Visigoth, aka Keith Hansen. For people who don't know, he passed away earlier this year.
It's true.
And his widow said I could just try to promote his stuff. So I've been trying to promote his stuff as much as possible. And for people who are listening to this on a podcast, I got my YouTube channels back. So I've been streaming a lot. I've had a lot of really great listeners and conversations and a lot of great comments. So thanks for everybody for listening. And thanks for all the comments. And thanks again to the Collins brothers. Thanks so much for joining me. And everybody have a great weekend. Stay safe. And I know it's wet out on the West Coast, so be careful. Thanks everybody for listening. And thank you guys. Stay there.
Yeah, thank you. Always a pleasure.